Aron Forbes. Welcome to ASCAP's first podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, congratulations on your 2 Emmy nominations. How does it feel? How did you react when you found out?
Super shocked. Very, very, very surprised. It was not on the radar, never been something that I even thought was a possibility, being somebody who's just in music my whole life. I was literally just sitting on the couch having coffee and Elmo, the dub mixer who I worked with, called me freaking out, and then my phone just started blowing up because I guess it all got announced, and it's just super surprised, man. Like really, really blown away.
So, one of your nominations was for you as a music director, of course, for the Billie Eilish doc. And I know there's a lot of confusion, even just within me, about what exactly a music director does. Like, it seems like
Sure.
it can encompass so many things depending on what artist you're talking about or what the context is. So could you just give a general sense of the scope of what a music director might do?
Sure. I mean, you're not alone. And I think that that's in part to a lot of things that are just interesting about maybe COVID being the great accelerator of many things. I think if you looked at what a music director did when I was a kid coming up and wanting to be on the road, and I'm a guitar player first, and the first thing I did was get on a gig, and I happened to be the music director for it. That version where you're a part of the band, you put the band together, you play on stage, you kind of are the live producer of how it sounds, like what parts are, extensions and transitions and all that stuff. I think that that's the prerequisite kind of baseline of what a music director has been or was. And then now you're getting layers and layers of deeper reach into places that I never would have imagined we would, in case in point, working on this documentary. But in a lot of ways, it makes a ton of sense. So yes, for Billie's live shows, I will work with Andrew, the drummer. We'll talk through drum parts and ideas of like, how do we heighten the music a little bit more in certain sections? And also, Billie loves it to feel like and sound like the record. So how do we make sure it's just like the record, and then find little moments to make it, ooh, that's exciting. That's programming and all the really interconnected wild stuff that we're capable of doing now, with MIDI and whatnot. I mean, building patches for Finneas that are literally the patches he used on the album, putting them just into main stage and having that all ready to go. And then now through COVID and even before that, I've been seeing a change for the past 5 years. I think is really kind of the turning point, where music directors often don't travel with the band. They build a show and send it out, and check in on it. And it's like, I'm there for late night, I'm there for SNL, I'm there for those big performances where it's really important that we are making sure that everything goes the way that we know the artist, to our best knowledge, wants it to sound and to feel. So that a broad stroke thing, I guess, if that helps at all, as to what it is. And I guess now even further with a lot of, everything going to late night, being pre-record, like doing tapings and stuff. And I actually mix every single thing that is going to be a performance for, like on our Instagram or YouTube or something. It's like, ultimate curation, trying our best to give any artists that we work with the best presentation that we think that they would like.
So I know that you have fulfilled so many roles for a lot of the artists that you work with. So like I know you co-wrote a song with Billie and Finneas, and
Right.
you produced, you're a session musician, touring musician, effective band leader, and you talked about all the tech work that you have to do.
Sure.
Would you say that the music director role is sort of like complementary to all of that, or necessarily involves all of that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's kind of it all stems from the same place. As if you think about a music director as a live music producer, then it kind of makes sense, because to me, it feels kind of like the same muscle. you're still gathering information about what somebody's taste may be. You know, you're paying attention to their body language. I mean, I spend most of my time really just read the room, see what it feels like. You know, somebody could say yes to you, but their body says no, and then you just know that the answer is no, and you just kind of go a different direction. Say, well, what about this? I don't know if that's any different. It's like, you know, if we're working on something and in a room, in a rehearsal space, and it's not quite working, it's not that different than if I'm sitting here and somebody's on the couch and we're working on a song and they're not feeling it. That feels like the same sort of interaction to me, where you're just picking up on a vibe and going, cool, like what's gonna make this work for you? You know, it's a very, very, very similar thing, which I think is for me why, you know, it's like you know, like one of the first artists that I did a lot of that for was Banks, where it's like we work on an entire album together, and then I'd be like, well, let me help you put this into a live show, because it's going to be easy for me, because I know, easier for me, I guess, to take what exists here and help translate it to a live situation, you know. And I love that. I love like end to end. You know, it's like I want to get my hands dirty. I'm obviously probably too type A, but it's like I want to get my hands in it. I love the idea of creating something and mixing it and delivering it and being like, cool, you know. And I also love handing something off. Don't get me wrong. I really love that too, having incredible people that we work with all the time. But a full end-to-end type project is very, very exciting, like the documentary, where, you know, I got to music direct a documentary that covered 5 years of content that I music directed, which is this kind of like really weird, you know, meta out there concept. But to do that and then mix it and deliver it is just a freaking cool experience, you know.
Well, so let's talk about your evolving role with Billie and Finneas a little bit. You've been with them since really the early days of their careers, before she exploded.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your work with Billie and Finneas has evolved over time? The work, but you know, also the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, you know, early on, Finneas and I really hit it off. He's such a smart person. You talk to him for a second, you're like, oh, this guy's a legitimate genius. You just know it from a couple sentences of conversation. I think that we really connected early on, especially Finneas and I, when, you know, he was first touring for the first time and experiencing what that's like to leave for months at a time, and the relationships that people from home and like all that weird stuff that happens. So I think we always had like a cool connection on that front, just talking about life, and it wasn't just about the music. And then, you know, I just wanted to make myself available to them early on, to like, I mean, you know, early on it was me and my wife going, telling all our friends, there's this girl, Billie, she's unbelievable, you know, and back then just trying to tout this phenomenal artist. So yeah, it was an ongoing growing thing that happened over very organically over the course of time. And there's, you know, there's pivotal moments of places where I probably jumped in and really wanted to help, because it's just a different thing when somebody's your friend. You like, you really want to help them, you know, succeed and protect them and all those type of things. So just like anything, with a long working relationship with any artist, whether it's live or studio or just friendship, is I think everything's based on trust, right? And so the more time that you're together, the more trust building you're doing, the more information that I'm gathering. It's like, in my mind, I have a vault of conversations that probably don't mean that much to Billie or Finneas when we're talking in passing, but they all tip me off to little tiny things, or in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Them commenting about that show informs me about what they want to do with their show, because maybe they dig that, maybe they don't like that. You know, it's all data. You know, you're just trying to gather bits of information to make an informed decision on what an artist would possibly like. And sometimes you get it wrong, but you're just doing it based on this collection, this filing cabinet of info that you collect over time. Fortunately, I've had many years to do that. So the trust builds and all that type of stuff. And I think that that's kind of where we're at this point within the project with the two of them.
So let's talk a little bit in more detail about The World's a Little Blurry, which earned you your 2 Emmy noms. So I think I understand where the sound mixing part comes in. You know,
Right.
what I imagine you were doing a lot of that in post.
Yeah, that was we can touch on the sound mixing really quick. It was a very deep dive. It was collecting, you know, archived hard drives of live performances from our front of house person, from our monitor person, and gathering as much multi-tracks as I could. And some of the stuff that's in the documentary was a mono, feed off of a camera. That's all we ended up with. I had to figure out how to make that work in an Atmos environment and make it play next to a song that I have a full, 60 track breakout. Billie's one of the quietest singers on the planet. She has this voice that truly transcends. I think she's a generational artist, and a voice of that will be remembered forever. But she sings so quietly, quieter than anybody. So you have, 20,000 fans screaming louder than she is. You have drums banging behind her. And it's like, if you saw the automation and the work that I had to do to get her vocal out in front of the band and the audience, that was the heavy lifting. And we're talking, in cases, line by line, carving out, re-EQing, reprocessing these things, because she sounds phenomenal. It's just, how do you get everybody else out of the way so you can hear this vocal that's so perfect and sounds like a record every time she sings it, And then again, getting that to play down over the context of an entire documentary with, things that we didn't think about. You weren't thinking back in 2018, 2017, oh, we should make sure we get a great recording of this for the future when we need to do a documentary. Like, that wasn't even like, just weren't even thinking about it. We're just like, oh shoot, now we have to go gather this stuff and see what we can do. So yes, that's the mixing portion of it.
And you touched on this already, but there's so much seamless integration between what she's doing live and what's happening in the rest of the film. I mean, look, there's a lot of silence in the film also. It's a beautifully still movie in a lot of places. But was it tricky to try and build those transitions, like between the live settings and the other sections of the movie that sort of come between them?
Yeah, so, I've been thinking a lot about how to answer the question of what is a music director to a documentary. And I think that I was doing an interview and it kind of got flipped and it made a lot more sense. And it's, if you think about it, just as, I think this is an English language thing, which I don't know, like, maybe you can shed some light on this. If you say director of music, all of a sudden it kind of makes more sense. And I don't know why that is, but in the context of film, it does, because you're coming in as an advocate for the music. And my whole thing was, how do I advocate for the tone, the vibe, all the things that, again, this vault of knowledge that I've collected from Billie and Finneas, how do I advocate on their behalf within this documentary that their music that they work so hard on comes across in this, documentary format in a way that they would love too. So it was a lot of very intentional, conversations. The coolest thing for me in this documentary was working with RJ Cutler. I mean, the guy, he's an incredible filmmaker. He's passionate. Anytime I think you get to work with somebody in a different format of art, you get to learn a lot about your own art, right? And just sitting with him, we have a lot of like really cool conversations. We were on the dub stage all through the holidays, for a couple weeks. And I basically, I had mixed the performances for 2.5 months leading up to that dub stage. And then we spent, I think, 3 weeks on the dub stage. And just sitting with RJ and hearing how he wanted to tell the story and what the line was. And then just saying, cool, how can I make the music help tell his story? because it was really interesting to me. And that came down to me having access to a lot of stuff, right? So I was like, oh, that instrumental background piece is really cool, but let me pull just the piano stem, because I think it's going to be more powerful if it's just that one piece, right? And so it's kind of that same, again, the same muscle of, if you're a producer coming into a project, oftentimes you're collecting really cool songs from a bunch of different writers and producers and stuff. I walked into an amazing situation with RJ and his team, who are so talented, who had cut this amazing thing together. And then I'm like, how can I heighten this? How can I make it better? How can I advocate for Billie and Finneas's taste? Like, there's ways that they want their music to be heard. They want the bass to be way louder than most people are comfortable with. There's parts of songs with Billie that are really important to her, that they like the background vocals super loud, like all these like little finite little bits of knowledge. But I know that going into that, it's going to make her more excited when she watches it and feels good about this very telling documentary that's not filtered at all. And hopefully continue the process, which is, we have curated Billie's music so like very painstakingly, always. It's like there her management, her team, Interscope, the label, like everybody's so behind the concept of, if something happens, whatever it may be, let's make sure it passes through our hands so that we get it out to the public in a way that she wants, and it builds on the story and all those type of things. So coming into music direct this documentary makes a lot of sense when you weigh all those pieces into it, as to why I would be there and why I would be helping, with the knowledge I have of what they dig and what they like. And I could just sit there and work with the director and have open conversations, and he would fight for things, I would fight for things. We'd end up in really cool middle grounds. It was a very collaborative, special experience that I can't quite articulate even. And it's one of those things that now, months later, with these Emmy nominations, which are unbelievable, it's really cool to go back and think about it, because I've actually had months to be away from it, and looking back and reflecting on it, it's a real once in a lifetime experience to do something like that, and it was so special. And when you're in it, you just put your head down and you're just going. But when you look back, you're like, whoa, how, when am I going to get to sit down with a world-class, incredible director and talk to him about how he sees film and learn from that, and then try and make the music heighten that experience? Just all around, like, beyond cool stuff, man. Like, really, really wild.
It almost creates like this built-in like demo reel for you in your career, because you get to see bits of your work over the past 5 years packaged so beautifully into its own art piece.
Yeah, and it was so emotional too. Like things like moments where I'm mixing this stuff like in my studio, and it's like it was, like any deep dive project, you're there for long hours, for long periods of time. There's definitely times I was tearing up just by myself, because maybe something emotional is happening on screen that you're remembering, wow, that was really intense, or like, oh, like I really feel bad for Billie in that moment. And it really hits you, because again, 5 years of time, going back and with subliminal processing, I guess, or time to kind of like really like let it marinate, and then you see it and you're like, whoa, that was pretty heavy, or seeing the song that we wrote together open the film kind of gets me every time, even till now. Even and whenever I see it, it documents a very special time in my life, and a special time in their life. But you know, again, when it was the beginning, it was like, there's this new artist, Billie Eilish, and people are like, oh, that's cool. Oh wow, I really like her. Like, to think back about, way back then, before everybody knew her as this global superstar, is really, it's special to have been a part of that experience and see it all the way through. I mean, it's just not not things that you get to do. So
Just a couple more questions.
sure.
So first, I mean, you're one of the rare collaborators that Billie and Finn have outside of each other
Right.
as a songwriter. I mean, they don't have a
Right.
lot of songs co-written by others. Can you talk a little bit about your experience writing Bored with them?
Sure. I mean, Billie was 13, so there's that. I mean, and she's saying then like she does now, so that's terrifying. I mean, look, we that song happened in a day, and it came together really fast, and um, it was really at a time where I was kind of sitting back and just watching, Finneas and Billie and just like the way that they craft, it's one of those rare moments where you're in the room experiencing something and going, oh, like walking away from that session, I was like, this is very different, it's like um I'm a guitar player first, so being able to like write a song on guitar and Phineas is a keys player first, just kind of sitting there playing guitar and then hearing, Phineas crafting these really quick, witty, so smart, like the way that the lyrics come together. And then their brother sister thing that I don't know if anybody can ever have unless you're just related, where harmonizing and stuff is like it's like they're one mind working together. Um, man, yeah, I think back about it here and there, and again, it's just I think it's very rare in our world within music or film or anything that you can really identify like a single day or a single moment when something was different. And yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, we did the song, we made a demo. Billie was sick and she still sang it and she crushed it. And then I remember Maggie came in at the end of the day to pick them up. Mom picked them up and was like, hey, listen to the song. We like played it back for her. She's like, oh my God, it's so pretty, and then that was that. And, a few months later, um, very interestingly enough, I found out through this documentary, Tony Saylor, who does all the um, visual media and that whole division of Interscope, who was behind this documentary. He's the one who got that song Bored placed in 13 Reasons Why, which was like a really interesting full circle thing to realize while working on the documentary. Tony's, just like everybody at Interscope, is just the best people. I mean, like I just don't know another label that's doing it like they do. They they keep winning over and over again because the people involved are so good. Like it's really a rare thing, I think, in the major label context of stuff now. So yeah, I mean, that day was that again, it's like it's hard to not say like, oh, that was crazy, that was wild, just getting to peer into things. I think the documentary shows some stuff that usually you don't see, like them writing songs. That type of footage doesn't usually exist. I'm really interested to see years from now uh what people think about the documentary, looking back at it, because that's again, like, you don't get to see people creating. It's a very private thing, and then you take two of the most private people as creators and have some of that footage, and it's like, whoa, that's pretty crazy that even exists in the documentary.
So as a music director, how do you know when you've done an awesome job?
I would say the best version. It's a really interesting question because it's a conversation I've been having amongst mutual friends we have, and just other friends within this community. The best version of being a music director is handling all the fires that come up so quickly and get them out of the way that everything just comes together and feels flawless to the artist, because at the end of the day, we're there to support them, right? We're doing everything in our possibility to make sure that they have the best possible experience that they can have. So if you make it through a day and everybody, and you know all the things that happened, but nobody else does, and the artist is happy and the fans love it, and management, the label, and everybody, I mean, that's a really good day, you know. And yeah, I mean, to me, that's a thing. I think there's also one other rare thing that's kind of cool, which is when you build, and the concept of building a show and sending it out is when you go to check in on it and have the separation to go and see it as an audience member and really experience it, and it's super cool. You're like, that's another moment where you're like, dang, like this really worked. Like this is a cool show. Like if I went to see this show, I would be pretty hyped. You
I'm
know,
pretty
so
good.
yeah, it's like this worked out well, you know. It's like, and it's again, it's not any one person. It's I mean, we have such a good team. Like I don't know another team in the industry that, you know, is like this, to be honest. I mean, the entire touring family is, I think people talk about like, oh, we're a family. Like it's really deep. Like we're the best of friends. We're on a group text that I guarantee when we get off of this, there will be like 3 things on it. Like we're talking all day, every day, best of friends. And that all stems from the family, Billie, Finneas, Maggie, Patrick, you know, like they're a strong family. They have unbelievable morale, like morals and goals and things that they want to do to help the world. And I think it's contagious. I think it's magnetic, and I think it brings really good people into the fold. You know, same thing with the documentary. We had a phenomenal team of people working on the dub stage, and I don't think it's an accident, because for whatever reason, them being as great as they are attracts really great people, just by that, you know, it's the power of attraction. I don't know what it is. You can't explain it, but it's just always incredible people everywhere we go. It's like, so like I'm working on this project right now next door. Everybody in the room I love, instant friends. You know, Elmo on the dock. The first thing that I did after, you know, of this whole COVID thing, he's like, "Oh, I have a house in Big Bear. You should just go up." And I was like, "Dude, we just met, but we're like, now we're just life friends, you know." And that's so cool, you know. And I think that is very telling of the entire experience and how amazing it is to be a part of the whole Eilish O'Connell family, you know, thing.
So this segment of the podcast is called Sound Advice.
Hmm.
So I would love to hear from you, for anyone listening who might want your job, not like the actual gig you're on, but the job of a music director.
Yeah.
What kind of skills or even personal traits would you recommend that anyone needs to be a good MD?
It's so wide reaching now as far as the things that we field as music directors. So I think that being a good player is a big leg up. You know, like being a great performer on your instrument definitely helps. And I know people that aren't that don't have that background entirely, and that's totally fine too. But yeah, that has helped me a ton. Being able to grab a guitar and say like, oh, I think it's like this, or piano, and just kind of like play parts and figure it out. Yeah, that's a good baseline thing. I think the tech side of it has become really big, and it's like I can comfortably work in Logic, Pro Tools, and Ableton any day. Like, you know, like the live shows are in Ableton, I produce in Logic, and I spent years in Pro Tools. So it's like, you know, being able to sit down in any situation and feel like you can go at it. And that's just figuring out how to make those things work for you. It's like, if you know one DAW really well, you can usually find ways to say like, well, how do I make this one function like the one that I know? And that's helpful. And then the one that takes longer, I think, is you kind of have to be, unless you start bringing people in, you know, it's like, I really like to curate and do it, like get my hands dirty through the whole thing. Being a decent mixer is pretty important too, because you're talking about music that's going to be played through huge systems, and it's like, is the bass going to be amazing? Like, are kids gonna freak out and have a good time, or is it gonna be kind of weak? Because these are all things you learn over the years. And there's times when I did a show and I listened back and I was like, needs way more bass, like little things, but it's mix. It's like, what's going to be harsh at 100 dB, like what, like all, and that's just trial and error. I think just with everything, it's find a friend and help them out, and start figuring that out. But it is a very eclectic grouping of skills, which is why I think it's a pretty small group of peers that I know that do this with these bigger artists, because you have to be able to produce transitional music, you have to reimagine songs, you have to be able to mix it well enough that the front of house person isn't like, dude, this sounds terrible, like I can't even work with this, and we're playing arenas. So yes, there's a lot of pieces to it. It can be overwhelming if you take it all on at once, but I do think that it's just like piece by piece. You're who was it, Derek Renfro, who works with me on everything now, who's so freaking talented. He was like, well, because he's working on getting better at mixing, and he's like, well, remember, it's like we're trying to be like, we're aiming for the person we want to be 6 months from now. And I think that that's the best thing to keep in mind, is like, you can't learn it all at once, but if you just take pieces of it and keep growing, one day you're like, oh yeah, well now I just know how to approach something when I see it and hear it that way. You just automatically react and fix it to what it's going to need to be. So kind of a long-winded rambling response, but hopefully some of that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, that's all I got for now. So Aron, thank you so much for joining us. Congrats on the Emmys and best of luck come the ceremony.
Thanks, man. I just, being nominated is that's the whole thing. Honestly, she's like, that's so shocking. So thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this. And
sure.
Yeah, thank you.